Well, good afternoon. It is good to be with you and to be able to spend this time and worship with you once again. The opportunity we have to talk about the work that was done in San Francisco over the last couple of weeks. John and I are talking about how it is that we wanted to go about our report. We've decided to go dueling microphones up here at the same time. I don't think even though we've done things on Sunday nights together, it's been one of us than the other, and we're going to try both of us, and we'll see how we do. We do our podcast together. That seems to go pretty well, so we'll see how this goes. But before we get into the work specifically in San Francisco, there is a passage biblically that I want to direct your attention to. It is here as we are together, as we are worshiping God together, and during this time of worship, it is important that we open up God's Word to make sure what it is that we're doing is following what God has given to us. And even though Tim has alluded to a great example of exactly what's going to happen tonight, it's with the Apostle Paul and the journeys and the trips that he was on. I want to give you an idea of how all of this began. Look at Acts chapter 13 with me just for a second. In Acts chapter 13, beginning in verse 1, listen to what's said. Now in the church that was at Antioch, there were certain prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. And as they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Spirit said, "Now separate to me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." And then, having fasted and prayed and laid hands on them, they sent them on their way. And so the picture is this church in Antioch where Barnabas and Saul, who will be Paul, are members, and they are leaving from Antioch, and they are going to be on what we commonly refer to as Paul's first missionary journey. And they do all the moving around that they're going to do, and they do all the preaching that they're going to do. They go through the region, they go back through the region, and at the end of that trip, listen to what's happening. The very end of that, now in Acts chapter 14, in verse 26, listen to what's happening. It says that they had preached the word, verse 25, in Perga. They went down to Attalia, and that's the end. In verse 26, from there they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work which they had completed. Verse 27, now when they had come and gathered the church together, they reported all that God had done with them and that he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. And so they stayed there a long time with the disciples. So then after Paul and Barnabas were on their journey, they returned to Antioch, and they report to the brethren there all that God had done for them while they're gone. And in that same vein, that's what we're going to do tonight. As this group here has supported the work in San Francisco and certainly supported the work that John and I and Kim and Ashley had done over the last couple of weeks, we are here tonight to let you know how that went. To let you know how it's going, the work is going specifically, and we'll give you an opportunity to think about that. And so to get us started, John is going to help us give us a little bit of just kind of perspective about the city of San Francisco, specifically the size that these two men, I will introduce them to you here in just a second, but those two men are dealing with size-wise here in San Francisco.
We've talked, I think, to some already just about the size of the city of San Francisco, but to kind of help put it in context, we've got some statistics up here in regards to the population of San Francisco and the population of Indianapolis. So as you can see, they're actually very similarly sized cities in terms of the amount of people that live both in San Francisco and in Indianapolis. That, however, is where the similarities stop, because as you can also see, if you were to take the entire size of the city of Indianapolis, the footprint of the city of Indianapolis is approximately 368 square miles. Take the exact same number of people, roughly, put them in 47 square miles, and you've got the city of San Francisco. And so this city is incredibly crowded. And it creates a lot of challenges in a lot of different ways. It also creates a lot of opportunities. The challenges primarily in the sense that there is nowhere where you can find open space of any kind. It's an introvert's worst nightmare to be in the city of San Francisco for 12 days. However, one of the things that it presents as an opportunity is that you can get from one side of the city to the other side of the city in just a matter of a few minutes. And so there's going to be a map that comes up on the screen here next. That final statistic there up on the screen just kind of, again, gives you a scope of the density of each city. 2,492 people per square mile here in Indianapolis, almost 19,000 people per square mile in the city of San Francisco. Incredibly crowded city. However, as I mentioned, that presents a lot of opportunities to teach the gospel. Regardless of what big city you may find yourself in, there are a lot of people who need to hear the gospel. And in a city like San Francisco, it's actually easy to reach a lot of those people. That red mark up on the screen, Moving Arts Academy of Dance, that's where the church meets. So they are renting space from a dance academy on Sunday mornings, and Josh and Kirby live in that same neighborhood, just a couple blocks south of there. So you can see it's very centrally located in the city of San Francisco. It's very easy to reach, and it's right in the middle of a huge, huge group of people where there are tons of opportunities for the gospel to be taught.
Yeah, one other quick thing about this. This is a relatively new but really important development for the work in San Francisco. This space that they are renting from this dance studio, 3 hours on Sunday from 9 to 12, where they're able to worship. We'll get some pictures of the inside of that here in just a moment. But they've been in there about a month, not very long. They had only met in there just a few times before we went down. Before that, they had been meeting in Joshua Lewis's house, in his living room. And that was working well for them. But this is a really important step for them. It opens the doors for inviting people, maybe a little bit hesitant to coming to someone's home for worship, that would be more reticent of coming to a place like this. And so it really is an important step for them, but very, very new for them. It was... We can talk more about these. There's lots of little funny stories that, come along the way. But this sign right here is at one of the corners, like way down here on the street corner, kind of leading them to. And we were told by everybody that, listen, it doesn't really rain in San Francisco. It doesn't rain. It mists every now and again. Well, that first Sunday that we were there, it rained, absolute torrential rain. And this sign that they made got completely ruined. They're like, we didn't think it would be raining. It rained, and it ruined the sign. But it really is an important thing and a really, really important step for them. Dead center of the city, and I think that's really important.
And you might even be able to kind of show with the laser pointer. So Josh and Kirby, like I said, they live just about 2 blocks south of the dance academy. They walk to services every Sunday morning. Calvin lives just a few blocks north in the heart of the Mission. That's the part of the city that the church is located. Jeremy and I stayed just a little bit to the west of there. And from where we were to get to the dance academy, it was a 15-minute bus ride. And we were basically on opposite sides of the city. And so you can tell just how easy it is to get from one side of the city to another. And so again, when you think about that from an evangelistic perspective, the opportunity to reach large numbers of people is really an easy thing for them to do, logistically speaking. Calvin, for instance, he owns a car, but he doesn't even drive. He'll walk, he'll ride a bike, he'll take a bus, whatever. Josh and Kirby, they do have a car. They don't use it all that often. The ease of moving around the city presents just so many wonderful opportunities to reach the lost in the city of San Francisco.
I want to introduce the two guys that we support there. I'll introduce one of them, and then John can introduce the other. I'll talk about Calvin for a second, and then Josh Lewis, who's been here once, many, many years ago, 5 years ago almost. He's been there since the very start. Josh Lewis and Josh Carter, if you remember, began the work. Josh Carter has since left, and he's preaching in Alabama. But Calvin Johns has recently come on, kind of in the middle of COVID, kind of started there in the work. A couple of interesting things about him. He's a 29-year-old guy, a single guy, but he is a California native. Not from San Francisco, but he is a California native from Southern California, Ventura County, and he's spent all of his life in California. And that really, I think, is a key component to this. He's been preaching. This decision to be a preacher has come a little later on in life. He was in school to be a lawyer, really motivated to help people. That was his motivation. He has been a Christian for the entirety of his life. I mean, he was born and raised in the church, but his mindset was, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to help people. And then he took that, very easy step, I think, where the best way to help people is to be an evangelist, to teach people about Jesus. And so he began working in a preacher training program in California. And when Josh Carter left, Josh Lewis got a hold of him and said, listen, I need you to come work in San Francisco. And Calvin's like, I don't know if I'm quite ready for that. And Josh Lewis says, you're ready for that. We need you. We need you. We need you right here. And so he is very, very humble guy, a great listener, wants to learn, wants to help, a great conversationalist. Really, really enjoyed our time getting to know him. We had not met Calvin at all before, talked to him on Zoom a couple of times, but he really, I think, moving forward is an integral part to the work there in San Francisco.
And then on the other side of the screen, you'll see Josh and Kirby Lewis and their two children. So the little girl sitting on Josh's lap, her name is Amelia, and the little boy sitting with Kirby is Ezekiel. So Ezekiel was adopted. The kids are just a year apart, almost to the day. I think their birthdays are 1 day apart, 1 year apart. And so it's such a wonderful family. And one of the things that really stood out to me is as Jeremy mentioned, we had met Josh before, but it had been almost 5 years ago. We had talked to him on Zoom a couple of times leading up to this trip, but we had never met Kirby before. And yet, almost from the moment we got there, they opened their home to us. We were over there almost every day. Maybe we were over there every day, actually. Spending time talking with Josh and with Calvin and with Kirby and playing with their kids and getting to know their family. Really, really just a welcoming, warm, sincere family. And like Calvin, Josh is a fairly young guy as well. He's 32 years old. He's obviously been preaching a little bit longer than Calvin has, but still a fairly young guy. And yet you can just hear and see the maturity in him, the way that he thinks, the way that he processes information, the way he goes about his work as an evangelist in San Francisco. He is serious about the work that's going on out there. And if everything is up to him, which of course sometimes there are extenuating circumstances, I think Josh Lewis intends to be in San Francisco for a very long time, teaching the gospel there, understanding the challenges that come with that. But this is a work that he is serious about. And really working in the inner cities is something even predated San Francisco. He worked in Atlanta for a couple of years, helping teach the gospel in Atlanta before moving to San Francisco. And so he really has a knack and a skill set that is really needed and applies well to the work that's being done in San Francisco. He enjoys working in the inner city. He enjoys being in California. And I think his family is structured in such a way that they can do a lot of good for a long time out there if that's the Lord's will for this family. Really, really a warm family. Both Josh and Calvin, just wonderful people to talk to.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit now, just kind of finish kind of an introduction portion a little bit, and we'll talk about some of the things that we did specifically while we were out there. This was a picture that we grabbed on the second Sunday that we were out there. A couple of people escaped before we were able to get the picture. We'll talk about them here in just a moment. We're going to pop up a little picture of them as well. But this is right outside that dance studio where they meet there on that second Sunday. Kim and Ashley are here. I think Ashley took the picture. She's there. She took the picture, I think. But there's really a couple things. There's one, her picture is going to come out again, but there's one really interesting, member that I do want to just make mention of. This is a woman by the name of Zora, and a lot of these people are family members. And what happens, and this is what you love to see, is that one person affected by the gospel who then impacts their family. And that's how the gospel multiplies. Not adds, but multiplies. And that's what's happened right here. Her brother, Aaron, he came back. They had been kind of followers of God early on in their life. And he had a car accident and he was searching for God again. He comes in contact with Josh, and Josh at that time And he has since fallen away, struggling a bit spiritually. But he gets his sister, Zora, to come, and that really began the line. And so in this, you have all of these people, in a lot of ways, related to her, from mom to brother to husband to children, and now all of these really important pieces to the work out there is grown from really this one family. And it's really an interesting dynamic when you begin to see it. And so this is a picture of you. We have a couple things. You want to say anything else here before we move to Edom?
Well, you can go ahead and throw that picture up there. But yeah, one of the things that you'll notice just in these pictures that are coming up is San Francisco is what's known as a minority-majority city, which means minorities make up the majority of the population in the city of San Francisco. And that is what you see in the cross-section of the church and the 20 or so members that meet there. When Jeremy and I were there, we were absolutely in the minority. And even in the language, there's a language barrier. Pedro, for instance, who's in the middle of that picture, is a Spanish speaker. English is his second language. Zora and her family are from the Philippines. English is their second language. And that is the reality of most people that you'll come in contact with out there. And so that also presents an added barrier at times in teaching the gospel, is that there is a real language barrier, even though we're still in the United States, because it's a minority-majority city, because it's a place where immigrants have gone to in large numbers. English is the second language for a lot of people out there. And so Josh and Calvin both have been practicing Spanish. Kirby is actually fluent in Spanish. And they're also trying to learn, at least conversationally, some other languages as well to try and help in their evangelistic efforts. But you can just see that in the cross-section of the church there, that it is a minority-majority city, and that's reflected in the church as well.
Calvin had made mention once while we were there, he was working on his Mandarin with Duolingo, and that wasn't going very well, and he has stopped that and moved to working on his Spanish. But he said he could order water. What he said, I can't remember exactly. It was some line that he still had, pretty good. But
Rice. It was rice. He could order rice.
That's correct. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But he has moved off. He's like, I moved off on a Mandarin. I'm now focused on Spanish and trying to pick up, some of those things.
So up in the top right corner, sitting next to Calvin, that's a young man by the name of Edom. He is originally from Ghana, but he's lived in the United States, I think, since he was a teenager.
Yeah.
So he's also a member of the church. He's not pictured in the larger photo. He had already left at that point. But he is a really, really solid, strong young man. He brought his girlfriend to one of our studies that we did as well. But also a really impressive man, and he's going to be an important part of the work that's being done there. He's really locked into the work that's going on there. And I think he serves as a support to both Calvin and Josh that's really desperately needed.
Yeah, and there were a couple of members who were out of the country for business. We didn't get to meet them at all, but there's one other member that we did have an opportunity to meet. We would have loved, her name is Summer. We would have loved to have included her in this picture. By the second weekend, she wasn't feeling very well, so she didn't come to our study on Saturday in the park or on worship on this second Sunday that we were there. So we were scouring through our pictures. So we only met her that first weekend, the first couple of days that we were there. And I'm going to share with you the lone picture that we have. And it's not going to help you. It's not. It's not going to help you, but it will give you some indication that she's there. So this here, right here, this is Josh right here. But this right here is Summer. I don't know if you could ever pick her out of a lineup, but it'll give you some indication, too, that first Saturday in this beautifully weathered city. It was like 10 degrees that day. So she is bundled up as much as you can bundle up. And I really, really wish that we worshiped with her on Sunday. Actually had lunch and dinner on Sunday with her. So spent the entirety of that first Sunday with her as well. Really enjoyed being with her.
So Jeremy mentioned that one of the things that we did while we were there was each Saturday, the 2 Saturdays that we were there, Josh and Calvin had set up Bible studies that were going to be done in one of the local parks. And they use Meetup for a lot of their Bible studies, and they included this in that Meetup page. And also on Friday when we got there, We helped pass out some cards to invite people to these studies. And so the studies on Saturday were very well attended, but they really served as a good opportunity for us to do some work in the community and invite people. And this picture up here that I think Jeremy took this picture, this is a picture of the intersection where we were standing, passing out cards. And this is noon on Friday. It was remarkable to me how much foot traffic, again, when you think about just how populated the city was, it didn't matter what time of day it was. There were just people everywhere. And so we would just stand on these street corners, and we would pass out cards, and people were relatively receptive to take them. I think both Jeremy and I would say that our perception of the city of San Francisco changed a little bit. I know several of you have probably been out there, and maybe you would agree with that. I think being in the Midwest, we have this perception of what San Francisco is, and there is some reality to that, don't get me wrong. However, when we were standing on these street corners, people were willing to at least stop and take what we were giving them. A couple of people would stop and talk. I know one time we were each on our own street corner, and I looked over, and Calvin was engaged in what looked like the most serious conversation that he's ever had with a couple of different guys, and at different times he had his arm around them. I think they were praying together at one time. And so while San Francisco is, in a lot of ways, very, very different from our Midwest culture, the reality is that people are people, and there are still opportunities to share the gospel with them. And literally in the middle of the day, we were able to just stand on a street corner and pass out hundreds of invitations to these Bible studies.
Yeah, so one of the main events that they were trying to get people, and a lot of the members themselves were coming as well, that on the 2 Saturdays that we were there, we would do an event, several hours long. Multiple of us spoke. We did some things on the parables of Jesus, where all 4 of us, John and I, as well as Josh and Calvin, would speak. And they were really, really well attended. You had family members that were brought. John had made mention that Edom had brought his girlfriend, came to that first one. We were able to meet her and talk to her. These pictures really give you a good indication of the 2 very different days weather-wise. This picture over here on the left, it was really, really cold and really, really uncomfortable. But these 2 pictures over on the right was the second Saturday, and it was very nice. The sun was out, and it was quite comfortable. But it was really and I think it was important for this group. It is, listen, COVID really caused a problem for the church out in California. California did not deal with COVID in quite the same manner that Indiana has dealt with COVID, and there were a lot of restrictive things put on. And so they have struggled outside of worship on Sunday getting together. And so this was a really important thing for them, that the group was able to get together, that they were able to be together. We've talked already, it is a really, really young Christian group. Outside of Josh, Kirby, and Calvin, you are dealing with baby Christians across the board. It is a young Christian group, and there are challenges to that, incredible blessings that come with that as well. But to get this group together, to engage in discussion, it was really, really cool. They brought family members that had not been to worship before, and it just was really, really a neat thing to spend that time with them.
Yeah, one of the things that we'll probably talk about in a moment was we got the chance, obviously, to spend a lot of time talking with Josh and with Calvin. And one of the things that came up on our first day there, we spent several hours talking with them, and that very reality came up in conversation, that there's a real challenge that exists when a 32-year-old and a 29-year-old represent the most mature Christians in a congregation. And they recognize that. Mm-hmm. They feel that. And they don't love that. But that's the reality that they're in right now. And they even asked, jokingly, of course, they were asking if we had any spiritual grandparents that we could export to San Francisco for them. And so since Jeremy was the oldest one there, we started calling him the spiritual grandpa of the group. But that is, I think sometimes I take for granted, I was telling Tim this earlier, I take for granted the opportunity that I have to just go over to Tim's house and have coffee and talk to him, or to go have lunch with Keith or with Kevin and just talk to them and bounce ideas off of them or ask for their input or their guidance on things. these two guys don't have that. It's just not there. And so that creates a lot of challenges, and they feel the weight of that burden that they're carrying. But you can see from how the group responds to them that they're doing the best job that they can. And this group respects them, loves them, and appreciates them, and listens to them. They are, without a doubt, the leaders of this group, and it's evident. And so they're seeking to support them and to help them, but that is something that's a real struggle. And these pictures just illustrate the reality that there just simply are not Christians there who have years and years of experience that they can share and can be that guiding voice for these two guys.
Yeah, even the ones that are there older physically than them, spiritually, simply don't compare. You're talking with months or a year of being a Christian, and that represents maybe the length of their biblical knowledge base even. And so it certainly has a level of challenge. This is a couple of pictures inside of when we were there worshiping together. And it is really a good space for them. There's a lot of room. They can put a lot of chairs in there if they need to. There is a room. I'll show you a picture of that here in just a moment. But there's another room that they could have a Bible class, which Kirby does for the children that are there. Not just her children, but there are others. There's a couple of 8, 9-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds. So they have some teenagers, and they all have a class together with Kirby, and they have another room for that. And this is a really, really good space for them and a really, really important step. There's a couple of things I do want to make mention, if John has something about this as well. They have a very organized worship. It is, once it gets started, it's a very organized worship. They have a plan. It's a plan that's played out. Now, Josh and Calvin do most of the worship, but we had talked a lot about it, and we even saw it while we were there. They are really working hard to integrate these men into their public worship. And we were able to see that. The first Sunday that we were there, Edom spoke before the Lord's Supper and really did a thoughtful, really, really good job. Elijah, he's actually right here in the picture. This is right here. He's a really young fella trying to become a police officer in San Francisco, one of Zora's sons, oldest son. He did the scripture reading and prayer the second Sunday that we were there, and they talked about he was ridiculous nervous about it, and it's very new for them. But it was really, really interesting to be there and to worship with them in the midst of this. It was really a joy. It really was a joy to spend that time in worship with them.
It really was. And there's a picture there of Jeremy preaching. They gave us both the opportunity to preach while we were there. I preached on the first Sunday we were there, and Jeremy on the second Sunday. And even just in having an opportunity to preach and then listen to their responses, you could tell that while, as Jeremy said, almost all of these Christians are spiritual babes in Christ, there is a desire to learn and a desire to understand and increase their biblical knowledge, and that is really evident. And so much so that even during Bible class, the first Sunday that we were there, they were studying through the book of Joshua, and Elijah, who Jeremy pointed out, we're in Joshua chapters 3 and 4, where the people of Israel were crossing over the Jordan River, and Elijah raised his hand, and he's like, "Where is the Jordan River? Can you help me understand where the Jordan River is?" And Jeremy kind of, after Bible class, took a map over to him and kind of talked to him about that. But I think just the reality that he was willing to raise his hand and ask that question, that says a lot about this young man. He heard something, he didn't know what that was, he wanted to understand better. The same thing happened with Zora. She asked a question about the Levites. She didn't know who the Levites were. Again, in the story of Joshua 3 and 4, they came up. She didn't know who the Levites were, and she raised her hand to ask a question about that. You can just sense that they have a desire to learn, they understand where they are, and they have a desire to grow. And that's really admirable, and that's commendable. And that actually is really exciting. Even though that knowledge base is still relatively young, there's an excitement that's created by seeing their zeal and wanting to learn more.
This is a picture of Kirby with the kids during Bible class. It's an important part of their time together for sure, but she really is the only one equipped to do that. And so that is on her shoulders. She is an Ezra 10 situation. It is her responsibility, and she is doing it, right? And it really is impressive to see her and to watch her interact with those kids. The few days that Kim and Ashley were there, they spent a lot of their time talking about Bible class stuff, just about material, about things that work and that don't. I mean, they talked a long time about those kinds of things, and I think that was important to her. She wants to be effective with that time that they have. They have about a half hour of Bible class time. 30 to 40 minutes is right around where they are. And she wants that time to be as effective as she possibly can be. And much like Josh and Calvin, who talked to John and I about all kinds of things, Kirby in much the same way, they want to be effective. And they are asking questions. And if they can do things better, they're going to do that. They really, really want to be effective where they are and to do the very, very best that they can do.
Jeremy mentioned that both Kim and Ashley came out the second weekend that we were there. And the effect that had on Kirby, I don't even know that I can actually relay just how important that was to her. Like, we had been at their house nearly every day for 8 days by the time that Ashley and Kim came out. When Ashley and Kim got there, we went to their house that evening, right?
Yeah, we did.
That evening. And we walked in the door, and Ashley and Kim introduced themselves to Kirby. And literally in that moment, her entire demeanor changed. It was remarkable. From the first 8 days that we had been there, in the 30 seconds, when Ashley and Kim walked in the door, we saw a different side of Kirby. Because I think the fact that godly women had traveled across the country to encourage her and to talk with her, you could just see in her face how much that meant to her. And this is a young mom who is doing her very best to raise children in a very difficult environment and to support her husband who is working in a very difficult environment. And she is carrying a lot of this weight on her shoulders. And having some support and other women to talk to, you could just see literally a split-second change in her and how much that meant to her. And I think even in the next couple of pictures that'll pop up, we're going to show just some pictures of the time that we were able to spend together as a group. And having Ashley and Kim there was really, really important for Kirby. We got to spend a ton of time with Josh and Calvin and hopefully encourage them and talk with them a lot about a lot of different things. But Kirby is going to be a really, really important piece to the success of that work out there. And the opportunity to encourage her and to build her up was really important.
Yeah, I wanted to put this. I made it as big as we could. You might say, well, I mean, who's this joker that jumped in here in the back? We haven't seen him. We'll talk about him here in just a second. But I wanted to just include this picture because it's just us sitting at Josh and Kirby's table. I mean, we're having dinner here. But I wanted to put this because we spent a lot of time sitting at this table. I mean, a lot of time sitting at this table, talking to Josh and Calvin, or Josh and Calvin and Kirby. We visited with Summer that first Sunday for a long time sitting at this table. And it really was an important part of our time. I want to let you guys know that when we tell them the fact that we came out there and that this group would be willing to send us out there and to allow us to be there, and the care that we have for them and checking in on them, it means more to them than you could imagine. I mean, it is really touching to them that we were there, that this group here at Traders Point, that we care about them, that we care about their work, that we want to be involved, that we want to help. I don't think they get that from everyone, but we want to make sure that they get it from us. And so we would talk about the fact that we pray for them regularly, that we talk about them regularly. And that was really, really important to them. And it is really that support that they need. John made the joke about the spiritual grandpa thing that I had to deal with the whole time I was there. As I sit around this table, 3 really young guys. I'm way older than all of those guys. And I'm like, I feel like an old person sitting here with these 3 young preachers talking about, all of these things. But they said, listen, what they need is they need prayers, they need encouragement, they need support. They would say, listen, we don't need any more preachers out here. We need support. We need encouragement is what they need. And so anytime you have opportunity to pray, absolutely do that. Reach out to them. Both of them are on Facebook. Send them a message. Let them know that you're thinking about them. If you ever are out there on vacation in that area or you're through there on business, stop in and see with them. I know several of you have done that already and spent time in Josh and Kirby's house as we have done. Continue to do that. It really is an important thing for them.
One of the things that developed over the 12 days that we were out there is we went out there with only a small knowledge base about these guys and the work that they're doing. And I truly feel like over 12 days, we left as friends with these guys. Yeah. And that is important to us. I think this is one of the realities whenever you do something like this. You set out to try and encourage someone else, and the reality is that you end up being the one encouraged in the whole process. And that certainly was true in this trip. I left encouraged by these guys and by Josh's family and by the Christians in San Francisco. Hopefully we were able to encourage them as well. And I think what took place is a friendship was built that will last far beyond the 12 days that we were out there. Hopefully there will be additional trips that come in the future, perhaps even them coming here from time to time, but certainly an open line of communication that exists. It's not the same as having that type of support in your local congregation, but like Jeremy said, if we can be from a distance the best support system that we can be, that's going to be so important to those guys. Now, obviously, we help in their financial support as a congregation, and that's extremely important.
It's expensive out there.
It's expensive. It's ridiculously expensive out there. But financially speaking, we got the impression these guys are okay. Mm-hmm. What they need is spiritual encouragement. They need, as Jeremy said, our prayers, communication. Reach out to these guys. They're extremely nice, friendly guys. They would love to talk to you. And any type of communication that we can get with them to encourage them in the days and months and years to come will be crucially important.
Yeah, it's the last picture that we have up here. This picture up here in the corner, Kim and Ashley and Kirby and Zora on a Saturday morning, the second Saturday that John and I were there. They had a study with just the ladies there, and it was good. We weren't there. We heard it was very, very good and productive.
They didn't let us come to that one.
They didn't. No, we had to struggle. That's another story. We tried to find a nice inside place to sit, and you can't find that in San Francisco, so we had to go to a park with our coffee. But this is a picture taken from them. This is just a picture of the most of us. This guy in the middle, he was in that last picture as well. He's a young guy. His name is Matt Vaughn. He's not anybody that we support. It's somebody that I knew. He went to Florida College. He's the same age as Eli, and so we've met him several times. I was actually surprised to see him. But he has just taken a job in San Jose, 40 miles out of San Francisco, preaching for a group in San Jose. And he got on the train on each Saturday and rode the train over to San Francisco, a little over an hour, and came to our studies in the park. This is the second Saturday. After that, we came back to Josh and Kirby's and had dinner, and Matt came back with us there. This picture over here on the left was the literal very last moment before we left. We took a picture right on that last day, Sunday evening, before we left.
And we'll start to wrap things up. We know time is getting away from us here, but just maybe a couple of closing thoughts as we conclude this. Keep these guys in your prayers. Keep that city in your prayers. While I said my perception of San Francisco changed, it changed some. It didn't change entirely. There are a lot of challenges out there that these guys are facing in their evangelistic work. And those challenges are real and they are ever present, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And so keep these guys in your prayers, keep that city in your prayers, and pray for hearts who are searching for the gospel, because they're there, they're everywhere. And these guys have a great opportunity and a big responsibility to take the gospel to that city. They're taking it seriously. And this trip really opened my eyes to the great potential that exists in the city of San Francisco and all of the people that they can influence.
Yeah, I mean, that says it good from my end. It is prayers, reaching out to those guys, being there for them as best that we can, I think will really mean a lot. And listen, John and I certainly want to thank you for allowing us to go out there. It was, I think, very important. It was important for our relationship with them. I feel it was extremely productive trip and a good time spent for the kingdom. And ultimately, that's the key component, right? It was really effective for the kingdom, both there in San Francisco and I think here, even in Indianapolis. So John, you can close us out.
Yeah, as we wrap things up, real quickly, I wanted to conclude in Acts chapter 17. Jeremy had kind of talked about the events of Paul's, what we typically call his first missionary journey. But the journeys that continued on after that one make up much of the pages of the book of Acts. And just in closing, and to perhaps just briefly extend an invitation, I wanted us to look at Acts chapter 17. Because this passage was on my mind when I thought about the city of San Francisco and the people that are out there. There are people searching for the gospel everywhere, as I just mentioned a moment ago. And Paul saw that in Acts chapter 17 in verse number 10. Then the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. And when they arrived, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. These were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness and searched the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. There were fair-minded people in Berea who were searching for the truth, and they searched the scriptures. And what happened as a result of that in verse number 12? Therefore many of them believed, and also not a few of the Greeks, prominent women as well as men. Everywhere you go in this world, whether it's the first century or whether it's today, there are people searching for the truth. And when the scriptures are searched with an open heart and an open mind and a willingness to learn, Christ has the opportunity to influence and impact those hearts. That's happening in San Francisco. That's happening here in Indianapolis. It's happening around the world. And it's a beautiful thing to see the changes that the gospel can make in the lives of fair-minded people. And so as we close this evening, I want to just maybe challenge you as you've been thinking about the people in San Francisco and the work that's being done out there to maybe bring all of that to a very personal level for just a moment and think about your own life. Are you a fair-minded individual who is constantly searching the scriptures? Whether you've been a Christian for 50 years or whether you're not even a Christian but you're beginning to think about those things, search the gospel. Search it daily and intensely and do it with an open mind and allow God to speak to you through His Word. And when He does, it will convict you and it will change you. And there's power in the gospel message when it's taught. So if you're here this evening, and maybe you have been searching the scriptures, and maybe you realize that it's time you make a change in your life, it's time for you to give yourself to Christ, to become a child of His, be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins, we can help you do that this evening. Maybe you are a Christian, but you realize that maybe the days of searching the Scripture with an open mind have kind of passed you by, and you're not doing that anymore. I would encourage you to get back to that fair-minded reality that Paul saw in the people in Berea. Rededicate yourself to Christ. Rededicate yourself to a life of service in His kingdom. And if we can help you, if we can encourage you, if we can pray for you, you can come to the front and let us know as we stand and sing.